coming out. My name is Herman Bigham. Thank you. I'm a part of a group called Bigham and Associates. We're a group of primarily African preserver, presenters of African traditional cultural arts. This group started about 7 years ago with David Lawrence, who's here, there, the fine artist, and myself at a small local library at Seasby Moore Library. In a highly distressed neighborhood, we took world-class African art in our community. And the community and the main branch library went crazy. And demanded we bring it back, brought it here. Since then, that exhibition, which was called, the exhibition we mounted here, is called The Majesty of African Motherhood. That exhibition has now traveled to 7 different cities nationally over a 5-year period. It's been viewed by over 60,000 people. It has, gained international acclaim because of the fact that we use African scholarship, and there's a very deep level of information that is revealed about the material, particularly how it's used in the culture and how it relates to our community and lifestyle and our lives contemporarily. One of the big issues with the presentation of traditional African art is that Africans are almost never a part of it. And so we saw that as really a major issue, and obviously because the world is being cheated of the true identity and reality and story of this material. This material, we call it cultural material, not art, because as you know, where we live in America, art can be anything. We got a clothespin, it's art. So we're talking about something, material that was a part of people's everyday life. They used it, some objects were utilitarian, like spoons. Spoons are particularly interesting because, like, for example, the Dan of Ivory Coast and Liberia, they use a spoon as a symbol of offering and vitality. The woman in the community who is most generous receives this ceremonial spoon. So, like, the competition in that society is not around a lot of the things the competition in this society is around, which I won't mention, but it's a competition around being the most generous person in the community. Generous in terms of looking out for other people's children, looking out for the community. Like years ago when we used to, scrub those old steps. I think people of this generation here might remember. There was a time when our communities didn't look like this. And it's because we had a different set of values. We had values, we had values that came from our cultural tradition, and we brought them up from the South and out of Africa. And these cultural traditions are expressed through this material culture, sometimes called artwork, sometimes called African traditional sculptural art. What we've realized that's the biggest void, I would say, is the use of and the explanation of this material for its major purpose in the culture. This material was used primarily to maintain cultural identity, standards, value systems, and a way of life. So there was what you will see, and what you will see very much identified through the text in this exhibit. You will see that it's about value system, it's about standards, it's about relationships, and that's what the material, that's what the art, quote unquote, cultural material is all about. We have also, to describe who we are. We're people who are lay persons like myself. Recently, a friend of mine who is an artist, and I was at this big opening, and someone asked me, said, Herman, you're doing all this exhibit. Are you a professionally trained artist or, have the FMA, whatever? And I said, oh no. Because when I looked at, if you would have seen some of the, like, in this particular exhibition, one of the primary art quote, subjects was a stack of paper bags in the middle of the floor. That was the artwork featured in that gallery. So the artist came in and dropped 4 or 5 bags, positioned them, and walked out and received, $20,000. So that's not what we do. We're doing something different. What we're about is having the people from the culture interpret this material, and what we have done, we've gathered a body of African scholars, African people who are importers of this traditional material, Africans from the continent, like Brother Tween, who's an artist and historian, and lay people to put together an organization that functions to restore our culture and for us to take back and take control of it. For example, I was asked in an article that we were writing for Black Books Bulletin art review to review books written by African and African Americans on traditional African sculptural art. Well, I spent a lot of time at the University Museum in Penn's campus, and they have an incredible library and an incredible buried treasure of 15,000 pieces of African traditional sculpture which they don't show. But in this article, I reviewed almost 1,500 books, and I couldn't find 10 books written by an African or an African American that had been published on African traditional sculpture. Okay? And not because Africans hadn't written about it, not because they've all been so Islamized and Christianized that that they have turned away from it. It's really the control. African art, quote unquote, is an industry. It's a serious industry. We're talking about one sculpture recently, 5 months ago, sold for $70 million. It was $7.5 million. In fact, that sculpture was a part of part of the auction of 150 pieces. It sold for over $350 million. So so there's an economic benefit and control for isolating African people out of their own cultural material. Plus, there is the most important benefit is this material tells us without any interpretation. If there were no labels or no tags, when you read the comments that people leave about this material, you can tell that it's talking to them in a special way. Now, of course, it's nice to have more interpretation and scholarship to add it and make it richer. But this material speaks to them because it's in an environment that is unobtrusive, an environment that is comfortable, and an environment that is welcoming. Okay? And that's what most museums are. Okay? So, and not by chance. So here we are at the public library. People say, why do you do exhibits in public, environments? Well, what we found is that the people we want to reach are the people who come to the public library. And meaning we want to reach the general public. We've had responses from people from Russia, Poland, Australia, all over the continent. The Africans who come here who seen this exhibit, continental Africans, who are importers and knowledgeable, they leave here in tears because they feel so validated by how this work is presented. This evening we have a very special blessing. We have a resident, Philadelphia resident from Nigeria, scholar, Brother Tween Saleem. He's also an incredible fine artist. His work was recently purchased by the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and those in the community who purchased it first should feel real pleased that they did. And Brother Tween will speak on just specifically the Yoruba material in this exhibition to give you the interpretation as a historian, as a priest, as a scholar, what that, how that material is used, what the colors mean, also the zoomorphic or animal figures. And then after that, Dr. Abdul will speak on on the Yoruba material and the Kemetic material here, the work from ancient Egypt, and draw the relationship that has been established many, many years ago, but hidden in libraries like the library at the University of Penn Museum. If you want to find some stuff, there's this old expression about if you want to hide something, put it in a book, and put it in a library. It's the truth. I mean, there's so many things that you can't imagine that have been researched, documented, that are just not made access to the public. So, we're going to start now with Brother Tween Saleem. He's going to come down.
El Cabo means welcome. Nice El Cabo. I'm highly honored for the opportunity that Madam gave me this evening to come to this show. First and foremost, as a Yoruba person, the beginning of my life has been very, very controversial because I grew up as supposed to be a Muslim who go to Christian school, but I choose the path of doing what I'm doing today, which at the beginning made me look like I am what you call an outcast, or you call black sheep in my community. But thank God today, my life has been an eye-opening to a lot of children, new generation, and upcoming artists all over Africa. Yoruba, as you know, are people. I always say it everywhere I go. 75% of the black all over the world today, from those of you who read well, you know the word Yoruba. We are standing before a Gelede mask. This particular mask is very, very powerful, well respected in the community of Meko people. It shows the influential aspect of women. Like in your proverb here that says, behind every powerful man, every successful man is a very powerful woman. In our tradition, Iya, the mother, is well respected. Even though the father is the head of the family. But most of the time when you go to all the deities, the aspect of feminist power is there, like the Oshun, or Oya, or Yemanja. All these gods are mentioned are women representative. So the mask here is one of the Gelede masks. The leopard symbolizes symbol of power. The mark on the face symbolizes the identification of marks that every Yoruba family have their own identification marks. Unlike today when there's civilization that because of interrelation marriage, people don't have tribal marks as before. I was lucky to have one because I was born in 1944, which is at the time when nobody can stop any family from giving mark to their children. The marks have names, like what I have here is Abaja. The Meko mask here is not having Abaja. It's having Etauru. And then the snake, the thing on top of the mask is like part of the hairdress. The arrow thing coming down there is symbol of power, which is knife hanging to what you, I don't know what you call it. You know when you have a small plate here, then you put, okay, that's what you got there. And this one is, as you look at it, you see it's like a cock. And then you have a leopard on top of it. It's a container, which is not everybody will have. It belongs to either an Ifa priest or the Egun Meko controller. Inside that place is a hole where you can put a lot of very important objects. The object at that time is like offering to the priest. If they come and for reading, for whatever. You know, in those days, people who are involved in this were not being too materialistic in thinking. Unlike today, when you go to somebody and they charge you $2,000 or 200,000 naira, so that you can't put such money here. So these were used to keep very, very important objects of worshiping. Like I told you, snake. I know a lot of people say, why snake? Even in the Christianity, you see they create a room for snake in the story of Adam and Eve. In Yoruba thinking, snake is very, very, very important. Because we believe in the disease of our people, disease of reincarnation. Every family in Yoruba land believe when an old man dies, he's still coming back. Either mama come back or baba come back. And there's occasion where some powerful people turn themselves to snakes. They can turn themselves to a different kind of animal, depending the belief of the family. As well for Ogun worshippers. The Ogun worshippers are like here, like what you do when you have a new car celebration. The Ogun worshippers are priests that deal directly with everything to do with iron. Snake is symbol of their belief because snake is so powerful, it can be invisible, it moves fast. Ogun is everywhere. And we used to say, Ọlọ́run má jẹ́ ká rí ìjà Ògún. Can you say after me? Ọlọ́run má jẹ́ ká rí ìjà Ògún. Today, those who go to war, I'm sorry to say this, there should be no war. But hence war comes, so people will make great sacrifice to Ogun before they go. And when they do it properly, they will go and come back without a small scratch on them. Ogun is supposed to be a very, very protective god. Anybody that travel, you ride bicycle, you walk with knife, anything you do that has to do with iron, Ogun is supposed to be a protector. And sometimes they can bring a lot of good luck. Ija Ogun is God, don't let us see the fight of Ogun. So that's why snake is used as a symbol of Ogun, because when you see a big snake, I know here these days you inject some of these snakes with some injection and they don't strike because you've already killed the invisible power in them. The real powerful snakes, no amount of injection you give him and you can stop him from striking. Then the horse here symbolize the fastness in the Egun makeup. You know, Egungun in our Yoruba thinking has to do with representative of the dead people. Around, which means when during the festival, when they have this mask on with the costume, people believe that these people come back from another world entirely. Around, before the arrival of education, arrival of British colonial system, Egungun were used to police the activities of people in the community. During the time of this festival is one of the best, but you cannot just say because this festival is on, you're a member. You have to be a special member. You have to be a member. So all these things are not just for decoration. So the other day I'm talking to Mr. Bigham. He said, am I happy? I said, I'm happy, but I'm not happy. He said, why? I said, I wish all these things are back where they belong to. But I'm very happy again that somebody like him and his association are using this to educate, to elaborate, to let people, the young generation and all people coming to know the importance of all these artifacts. The two calves here, you see, represent, it look like girls, a symbol of Ibeji. Probably the owner of this mask must be like Mama Ibeji. Back home when people have Ibeji, you don't hear much of Baba Ibeji. You hear much of Mama Ibeji. That shows you how much people have respect for the mother, Mama Ibeji. Then back to this place, you have these two. You will see the carving of two Ibeji at the shoulder. The hairdo has to do with Shango, god of thunder. I remember when I started coming here in the 60s, a lot of bright sisters are blowing their hair. It was called Afro. But unfortunately, people don't know then that the Afro wear thing is for when a king dies. See, like, but if I live long, by the grace of God, a couple of years from now, I may become king in the body. Let's say I die, and I have 5 or 10 wives. All the wives will blow up their hair. They will paint themselves in black powder and mourning for days, for months. So at that time, when people are publishing books, like what Mr. Bigham just said, they give wrong impression about the hair blowing thing in Africa. Though it's good that people turn it to fashion, but it's for sorrowfulness. Now, when I start coming here, when I start braiding my hair, men don't braid hair in Africa. You have to be a priest. Yes, you have to be a priest to get your hair braided, or you're wearing a symbol of power. So when I start coming here in the 60s, I have a record I did for a company in New York, African Record Store. So my hair was braided, then I have a very long hair. And then a couple of years later, my brother Steve Wonder did that just called to say I love you, and then he has his hair braided as a cover of a record. So everybody in America started braiding it, even the sports people now today. Back home in Yoruba land, men don't braid their hair except if a Shango priest. So this is symbol of a very powerful Shango. And he's somebody who loves, he said, to be touched by a woman. So this is an occasion where he has to have his hair well braided with a lot of ornament attached to it. The box, the calabash, the box is holding, is made out of akuko. Akuko is like what you call rooster. And inside it is where whenever anybody comes for offering, they will put there. And if the farmers as well go to the farm and they find the stones, Edun ara, say Edun ara. Edun ara. Edun means a polished stone. Ara means thunderbolt. So when they find it, they will bring it to Shango priest. He will keep it there. So most people, during the time I'm growing up, a lot of women will have an imitation of this. Not exactly spiritual one like this. As places to keep jewelry, earrings, and things like that. This one belongs to the Babalawo. The Babalawo is the divinatory priest. Their job is to read people. Their job is to, like the other day when you have your election here, somebody win and you give the election to somebody. In our tradition, you can't do that. Because they will read and tell you if the person who take what doesn't belong to him, what's going to happen. And sometimes when a king has to be ordained, they will blindfold his eyes. And several types of these calabashes or carved wood, special ones, ritual ones, will be kept on the floor. And they will ask the king to pick. If the king is going to be a very powerful and very successful period king, he will pick the right one. Because when they open it, if the king pick the one with honey, it means his time is going to be very peaceful, there's going to be crops, there's going to be a lot of success in the community. If you pick the one that has a little, swap bee, there, then it's terrible. But today they use money to change it, which is part of corruption. Those days they can't do that. They either tell him, look, you don't pick the right thing, but either you keep off and let somebody else come in. And at the same time, this kind of color, this type of carved wood, if a king misbehaves in the society, there's nobody who can judge a king in Yoruba land because they believe he is the second in command to Olodumare, Alashe, Igbakeji Orisha. Because nobody can judge him if he misbehaves, they will tell him, the members of his kitchen cabinet will tell him to go and do the right thing. And he will go inside his room. This calabash that he picked that day, when he opened it, immediately he sees his own shadow. He's not going to talk in the second day, he will die. So that in Yoruba cultural and mythological thinking, Oba is untouched human being. That is why sometimes we believe that they came to this world with anointed blood. Anointed blood. And this one is a symbol of concoction making. When you go to some priest and you need something, they will not just take stone and grind it. They have a special wood that will put different objects there and prepare it to give up. But most of these are very, very old. Today you can find some fake ones, which were made as a copy of these very important objects. And this one has to do with a king and his subjects. The importance of beads. Beads is so important in the royal presentation. Nobody in Yoruba land that ever become a head, either a priest, either a king, either even ordinary sheep, that you will not see symbol of color beads on him. There are some colors for Shango priest, there are some color for Obatala priest, there are some color for Oloshun, and there are some color for death. And there are some color for a girl who is about to be married. So each of these beads color have purposely way of using them. Like if a girl was married and she went to a place where there's a lot of, like we are now, she will wear certain beads. When you look at her, you know this woman is being owned by somebody. You don't talk to her. In those days, I don't know today. Today, maybe they even try to kill the husband and take his That is what your culture brings to us. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have a proverb from my father that says, Aki Soto. Aki Soto. Can you say it after? Aki Soto. You don't finish do the talking by yourself. Let other people do it. Thank you very much for coming.
What does it mean?
Well, I think my brother Dr. Abdul,
he'll be talking about
he's
that
the one who's going to talk about that
Yeah.
later.
To have, two brothers who are particularly gifted and have done so much research and have also, as Twin mentioned earlier, as he has suffered for not taking the easy road in the early part of his life. So we're talking about cultural orders here. And thank you. Dr. Abdul.
Thanks.
Dr.
It's a pleasure to be here. As you know from my name, it will seem obvious that I have an Arabic name, but we'll get to that later. The thing is that I grew up, when I was 4 years old, my parents wanted me to be a good Muslim. They wanted me to grow up to become a good Muslim. So I was supposed to go live with my grandmother's sister. In African kinship terms, we don't have, our kinship terms are extremely simple. We have mother, father, brother, sister, and it's all combination of those. So when you start getting to cousin, uncle, and all that stuff, it becomes very complicated for me. So it's my grandmother's sister, that would be my grandmother, culturally. So, but within days or maybe weeks of me getting there, she made a transition into another realm. So I had to live in Ilorin, and the Muslim, they have a concept for a student, it's called Al-Majiri. That's somebody that is a student. They identify the most learned Islamic teacher, and the young kids are supposed to go to this teacher and learn from him. And the community is supposed to support them, give them food and everything. All they do is just study the Quran. So I was in this, that's where I was until I was I graduated from the Islamic school at the Quran by the age of 10, because they beat you with stick and all kind of things, It was very difficult. So at 13, I just said, I got to look for my parents. This thing is not working because I was selling akara, on my head and all that stuff. So to come from that point and to be at the point where I'm talking to you now is extremely humbling. So I always make references to where I come from. So at the age of 13, I went to look for my parents, and I took my other sister that was doing similar things like me. And we went up north to Kaduna in Nigeria. And my father is a civil servant, he's an immigration officer. So when we got there, he got transferred again. And now I was in a Christian school. I was 13 years old. They told me, I said, I'm a Muslim. They said, we didn't ask you to come here, Are you going to pray with us and give sermon or whatever? If you don't want to do that, that's the door, you can leave. And my father had already left, and I knew what I'd gone through. So from there, I went, I started doing what everybody was doing, praying and giving sermons, So that experience led me to where I am today. I came to the United States not knowing that I'm black, because I came from a country of 100 million black people. So, and my training in Nigeria, my parents wanted me to go to medical school. I quite didn't understand what I wanted to do. So I had to run away and come to the United States, But when I got here, everywhere I went, some people were either sad that I'm black, some are happy, some were indifferent, But the thing is, it was very curious to me. I said, what's the big deal? Everybody in my country looked like me. So I started going to the library, and I studied architecture for a while, and then I switched in my last year. I got my degree in economics. And I just kept reading, you know. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but every time someone would say a smart thing about Africa, I had to respond for them, like this, you know, on my fingertip, you know, because I'm always in the library reading. I just wanted to be armed with knowledge. So I went to the University of Hawaii to do, I wanted to do architecture undergraduate, but I changed my mind because architecture was project specific. So I felt I could do planning because planning tried to integrate everything that architecture cannot deal with. So I went there to University of Hawaii, and I was in school, and some particular incident occurred that brought me to Philadelphia. Dr. Ezehile had come to give a lecture, and he's a well-known historian, and he came down to, and I told him, okay, so what's the big deal? Africans are from ancient Egypt, you know. I've read that. I've read Sheikh Anta Diop's book, you know, what's the big deal? So he said, have you read Civilization of Barbarism? I said, no, I've not heard about that one. I said, but I've read most of Sheikh Anta Diop's book. He said, go read that book. And when you read that, you can call me. So I read that book, and it had a transforming effect on me, and I asked him, where can I do a PhD? He said, come to Philadelphia. So I came to Philadelphia. So there must be something, the Yorubas believe in the concept of destiny, you know, Ori mio, Eda mio, you know, that your destiny, sometimes you're destined to do some things. So I was exposed to Islam, exposed to Christianity, and then exposed to the reality of living as a black man in the United States, you know, and being a very sensitive person, coming from Nigeria and my background and everything, you know. So I came here. When I came here, I was very fortunate. At the time I came to Temple, Dr. Benga, the leading, he's one of the leading Egyptologists, one of the two that were at the UNESCO conference in 1974 to decide the issue of the relationship of ancient Egypt with Africa. He presented with Sheikh Anta Diop. And at that conference, it was unanimous. It was only the two Africans. They had asked everybody to bring their report and to present their findings. But nobody was able to present the information like they did. As a result of that, the UNESCO volume on General History of Africa was published. So I was very fortunate in that respect, and I was Dr. Benga's assistant. So that's my background, and that's the background that I bring into talking about these pieces. You know, I didn't actually grow up like seeing any of these things. I would have been even killed if I attempted to, you know, because my hometown maybe is 99.9% is Muslim. And I might be the only one that is not in the whole town. I'm just looking at the symbolism and then comparing them with what with ancient Egyptian ones, Kemetic ones. The leopard is a symbol for kinship, even in Africa. Yoruba Bini, you know, and if you know, Kukubengu was a banga. Anybody know who that is? He said he's the only cockerel among hens.
What's his name?
The only cock among them.
Yeah, he's the only.
What's his name?
Is Mobutu Sese Seko. Mobutu Sese Seko calls himself Kukubengu was a banga, the only cockerel among hens. When he dresses, he puts a leopard skin on his body. It's a symbol of, even though he's the modern ruler, he still understands the African tradition. So he uses the leopard. Maybe most of you, if you're familiar with his image, you will have seen him covering his body with leopard. From Zaire. And the whole ritual about Gelede, you know, is most male having a costume where they actually is a formal occasion in which they honor the power of women as mothers and as people that give life. So most of the time the Yoruba say, when a Yoruba person wants to say something, if you're looking for something, you have to make prayers to your mother and to women and to their power. They normally say in Yoruba, Yami Oshorunga,
Iyami Oshorunga means the name specially given to the powerful woman. Every Yoruba person believes that every woman, if you're a woman and you can carry another woman in your stomach, which means getting pregnant and have the baby, you are automatically an agent. Here, when you hear the word witch, you look at it negatively. And what Iyami Oshorunga, which that's a special name to use for the women, the powerful women. It might be a market woman, it might be an educationist woman. Any powerful woman will be referred to as a member of the Iyami Oshorunga. Because there's no way, nobody in this world can do anything without the support of his mother.
And that's very interesting, the modern interpretation and the Egyptian one. The concept actually came from ancient Egyptian one. And it's this cobra, the red cobra that does like that. It's wajet. And basically it has to do with the Egyptian myth. When how many of you are familiar with the concept of noon? The noon. Yet Mara, the first thing is Mara. When that Mara was water and everything was in it. God was in it. Everything that manifests was inside that power. Initially, that noon had only one eye. So, but it was known, and then depending on which cosmogony you're talking about, there's a Hemopolitan, there's Heliopolitan, there's Theban, and there's the Mephite. So depending on which of the ones you're dealing with. So this noon gave, in one of this myth, or cosmogony, the noon gave the eye to one of his offerings. I think it was Shu. And Shu went away with the eye and didn't come back. So the noon had to invent another eye, and that's the all-saint eye. And that eye is in the center. This is why when you look at the Egyptian pharaohs and traditional Yoruba, you see that there's an eye right here on the forehead. And that eye plus this symbol, this cobra, is two female. They're called two ladies. One is vulture and the other one is cobra. Those two women are the ones that founded the dynastic Egyptian civilization. They call the two ladies Wajet. Sometimes you see the vulture and then he has a snake on it. And if you look at the exhibit of Tutankhamun, you must have seen that Tutankhamun had like a vulture and a woman. But the interpretation, because Yorubas have not been living in the Nile Valley for about 1,000 years based on my research. So a lot of things are lost, and then there's been a lot of other influences. We have colonial influence, we have influence from Islam, from Christianity. So it's not that women are witches, but it's the power of the women. And that's what the Wajet is. It's supposed to protect the king. And as you know, the seat of the king itself is a female. That's the Isis. It's called Asher. But why the woman the symbol of the power? The seat where the king sits is a female. And that seat is the hieroglyphic sign for Aset, where we know in the Greek appellation Isis. That is the royal seat is a woman. So the concept of Ajay came from, because we're speaking African language, and then the people that want to interpret the African language, they don't have any way to interpret, they don't have any they don't have a way of interpreting it in their own language, and so they say witch. Because even when we say Ajay in Nigeria, it just means power. You know, and all mothers are supposed to be
Very powerful.
powerful, because what the mothers do is they will use their feminine power to protect their children. And what the female symbol does is to protect the king, because the word Oba means soul. The king is the very soul of the people. So if anything happens to him, if he becomes deformed, if he loses an eye, if something is a reflection on the society that he is governing. So that's it for that. So that word is extremely, very important. A lot of these cultures, so, because it's human beings, is subject to the transformation. The Shango happens to be the pre-Islamic god of my hometown, of Ilorin.
Yeah.
Because, and it's Kunun, and also is Min. It's two, in my research, what I've been able to find out is the god, Shango is the god Min, is the fertility, and Kunun. So you see, both is still all within the same interpretive stuff, because if you look at the king of Benin, there's a phallic symbol on top of it, and also even Tutankhamun has the same thing. It's like erect, and this Shango is supposed to be related to that, and it's Min and it's Kunum. As you know, Kunum is like Obatala is the one that
Created it.
yeah, created people and others. There's some other symbols like right here. Can you lay?
On crocodile.
Okay. As you know,
Or the alligator. And you have turtles.
yeah, you know, as you
And then
know,
the one on top is rabbit.
that's rabbit. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. The bird is like something related to kinship to Horus. And the crocodile, as you know, represents Sebek. Sebek is an ancient, and in Nigeria, the crocodile was worshipped. Yeah.
In addition to what he's saying about the word, we used to use the word eyelini. We believe that human beings, when you sleep, this body sleep, and the spirit that control you is out somewhere. And if you are a good dreamer, sometimes you find yourself among people you don't know. You can find yourself in market. You can find yourself in anywhere. That's why the board is so important in our thinking. So it's symbol of the heart.
Yeah, so you have Sebek. In Ibadan, this is the god that was worshipped in Ibadan up to up to 1935. They were still worshipping crocodiles. Just like ancient Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians had 42 nodes. In Africa, we have, and every city have different manifestation of God and different symbols. As you know, Africans are totemic people. You know, we're related. So all this environmentalism that is in vogue in the West, we've been doing it a long time. Like me, like you see, I'm an elephant. That's my family. Ajanaku, you know, that's my family.
Ajanaku means, you know, when you say Ajanaku, it's a kind of animal that is so big that when you pass through, you cannot see, you don't see him.
Yeah, and they said the head at the
which means if you kill an elephant, there's no small boy who can carry it.
So what we do, we don't kill it.
You can't kill it.
Because how you carry it. And then there's also the myth of the 12 blind men. They want to see the elephant, right?
Yeah, like what I explained to Mr. Bigambi earlier, each of these objects in each family, they sometimes have them marked on the body of babies. So that each family have their own, like me. Let's say tomorrow somebody wants to say, because his father is rich, maybe during the war, his father probably be a slave who fight for us and became part of the family. Maybe he's richer than my own side, and he wanted to take what belongs to my father. Then he will say, okay, everybody remove your clothes. So when you remove the clothes, each family will find the mark there. If it doesn't, because today people don't give travel mark anymore, but they still give the body mark. So the other day I showed him, I have it in my arm, I have it in my stomach, I have it. So sometimes it may be animal, it may be snake, it may be turtle, it may be anything that the family love as their own symbol.
And then, you see, this is the beauty of the African culture. You cannot be alienated. Even though I was raised as a Muslim, as a Christian, and all this stuff, there's 5 names. Every African, actually every Yoruba, the Yoruba itself, their king, they were pharaoh in ancient Egypt. The word Yoruba itself doesn't have meaning in Yoruba language. It's only in ancient Egyptian language that it has meaning. People were trying to find it. In Nigeria, not everybody is Yoruba. People all became Yoruba later because the dialect that was used in writing the dictionary was Yoruba, and it's the people from Oyo that are called Yorubas. But there's other clans. There's Egba, there's Ijebus, and there's other Yorubas, but all this large family now is being referred to as Yoruba. But before, Yoruba is only relating to the people from Oyo and the king. I'm Yoruba because my hometown is under the Oyo jurisdiction, and the totem
Oyo Empire.
Yeah, the totem elephant itself is part of the Aranan Kagafo is like the commander-in-chief of the Yoruba Empire. He was the one that had a lot of ambition. He wanted to be a king. And he wanted to break away from the Oyo Empire, and he asked somebody from the northern part of Nigeria to help him, but that person killed him.
Betrayed him.
This is how
we make a joke about it today.
Yeah.
I don't know he was part of me. I thought he's typical northerner. I said, you know Afonja people, what they've done. He said, I'm Afonja. I said, ah. I said, you know what your great-grandfather did? Because this man was so powerful. Very, very powerful. And you want to get out of the clutch of Allah Afonja. Then the Afonja Ilorin asked for assistance of, we call them Fulani, these people that take care of cows. Mm-hmm. You know, many years ago, even people come from Egypt, they are all cattle dealers. You know, they take cows, they live by the animals. Mm-hmm. And he is so powerful with his Islamic, Quranic medicine. So he asked him to come and help him, to use his power to support his own power so he can conquer the influence of Allah. Not knowing that this guy has his own ambition and is representing the Islamic power from the north. So he penetrated to this guy's army and got him killed. And now today, they were sitting in that entire community. But thank God there's interrelation marriage, that even if you want to separate them. Have you ever cooked beans and rice before? Okay, you know you can pick the beans out of the rice, right? You can't, because you know the black-eyed beans, you can pick it out. Yeah. But if you mix rice with water and cook it, can you take water again? No more water. So it's now one family, but we are still talking that we want Yoruba man in Delta. Yeah. So maybe you will go back with me one day and become king in Ilorin.
Yeah, but the thing is that the beauty of history is that everybody, I speak Hausa and I speak Yoruba. And in my hometown is multinational. There's about maybe 7 nationalities within in my hometown. There's Baruba, there's Nupe, there's Igala, there's Yoruba, there's Ibira, they have there's Hausa, there's Fulani. So when you have all this blood and you have all these mothers, which one are you going to pick? You know? No, we just love all of them. But what had happened was that Afanja, when he was given the mission to go fight a war, and when you lose a war as a commander, you have to commit suicide. So he didn't want to die, so he was trying to ask somebody to help him break away, so he can form his own.
See, like what I was saying before about opening of the spiritual Igba, like what he's talking now. Let's say the king went to fight and he got defeated. When he come back to his palace in the night, on the daytime, he go into his inner room and open this sort of container. And the second morning, the next thing you will hear is that people say, Baba Kilo.
Yeah.
Baba is gone.
And then another thing is they can give him an ostrich head, and then they say the world has rejected you, the universe has rejected you, because it's like 5 levels. The people have rejected you, and you have rejected yourself, and they say you must go. So, like in some communities, after 8 years, the king has to be put to death. The Jukum, So you can imagine.
Unlike today,
Yeah.
you don't want to die when they get there. Because the enjoyment is
Because they know that the power corrupts. So that eliminates people that have ambition and they don't want to represent the people. So because if you know that,
Why would anybody want to be king?
We're going to get ready to go into
because it's important what we do because we don't want to mislead people. Because this is a very serious thing. Because as you know, Egyptology is not even taught in regular university. You have to go to University of Chicago, to Oklahoma, and Memphis, and some other, Penn has an Egyptology program. But it's not, you don't get a degree in Brown University. Maybe Brown is the only one that gives a degree. But I'm trying to make a linkage between Yoruba and ancient Egypt. But it's very systematic and it's precise. I look in the dictionary, I understand Yoruba, and I know some Medu nature. So when I try to tell you something, it's something that I've really worked out on. And one thing I learned in knowing something, the more you know, the little you know. Today, I can tell you with all conscience that ancient Egyptian, this god of writing is Ifa. And today, out there, even before I came here, there was something that I found. Basically, the myth about the Osiris and Set. When Osiris and Set were, it's Horus and Osiris were fighting. Horus and Set were fighting because Set had already killed Osiris. So, you know how Horus was born? Through immaculate conception. And that's what the Asher is. The Asher itself is actually, the word Asher in Yoruba is actually the blood, the menstrual cycle that women have. God made a command that from that point on, women can start giving birth to children. And this is why the symbol for royal power is a Set, is a woman. And that's the reason why I said, Isis, her name is that. And that's why her glyph is a Set. That royal seat is a Set, is Isis. And Yoruba preserved that. And Jehuti is the one, he was there. In Yoruba, we call him Ifa. He was there when the world was being created. He may have been the same as Nun or Ra, I'm not very clear about that. But he's the one that took all the report. He's the god of writing. And he sat down there and was writing everything that's going on. And today, the Yorubas, they do the same thing. They're using the Ifa for the same thing. And when I get over there, try to remind me to give you a text that the Yoruba wrote when the Muslim came to Nigeria. they use the Ifa as a means of preserving all those texts. The other thing that I found was that the Ifa text was able to preserve them because they continue with the same tradition, with this God of writing, keeping everything down. So everything that happens, all the Ifa priests, they write it down. You know, all events, contemporary, and some of the things that went on. So when the Europeans came and just said that, oh, all we have is the oral tradition and all this stuff, and we don't know where we came from and all. The Yorubas, using the Ifa text, which is in ancient Egypt, is called Jehuti, they were able to preserve that they came from 7 Ifes. And one of the Ife is called Ifewara. And WR in Egyptian, in Medunecho, means goddess, it means king. It has a lot of meaning. I have like about 20 words that narrate that in Yoruba. So it means master, it means lord, it means, in Hausa, for example, one of the languages that I speak, you know, there's a concept, Yahweh in Yoruba, and in Hausa it's called, in ancient Egyptian it's called Nebet Uwe, because that's the wife of Seth. But because she was affiliated with the bad man, but she's still the sisters of Isis. So nothing bad happened to her. She's still very worshipped, and she's called the goddess of the house. And in Hausa we have a concept called Wargida, and it means literally that, the goddess of the house. And in Yoruba we have Yawo, a mother of sacred, or goddess of sacred, you know, because Awo is sacred, both in Yoruba and in ancient Egypt. And that's about the only thing that I saw. And a little clarification on the issue of Agbakeji of Orisha. Osiris is the lord of the dead, but Horus is the lord of the living. So the king represents Horus, not Osiris. So it's the assistance to Horus, not Osiris. Because Osiris is the one that deals with the dead. When you die, your heart is going to be weighed, and your heart must be able to balance a feather. But when you're dealing with the living, Osiris, the word Osiris has many meanings. It means daylight. It has to do with living things. So Heru represents the living.
How about resurrection?
Resurrection, that has to do with Osiris. He's the first person to die and be resurrected in the whole world, before Jesus.
Okay, we're going to move on now.
Thank you very much for inviting me here. It's quite a pleasure. Can you hear me? Thank you very much for inviting me here. It's really an honor, and I feel very privileged. Like I told you, over there in the hallway, all I can think about is when I'm 13 years old, you know, so just bear with me. You know, even though I've been teaching for some time, and I've been giving public lectures, but this one that I've just been doing post-doctoral. So, because now, you know, teaching university and not having a PhD is very traumatizing, you know. People they make fun and they say, oh, what do we call you? Professor or doctor or what, you know? So I had to go through all of that. But now that I'm done with these formalities, you know, then I can feel very comfortable and free to talk. But at the same time, I also have the backing of a formal institution to back. I mean, at least someone won't just think I just came off the street, you know? So, the research what I'm talking today about came from the research I did for my dissertation. Basically, my approach was to use the approach that is used in other disciplines to arrive at certain answers to historical issues. the Yorubas said in their oral history that they came from ancient Egypt. Like I told you, when I was in Hawaii, I didn't think it was any big deal. So they came from ancient Egypt. So what does that have to do with the price of oil? I'm living in the 90s and 2000. But history is important because if you know your past, you will know your present and you know your future. So this issue has been an issue that's plagued Yoruba and also African history since 1948. Nobody wants to deal with it. There's two schools. There's the school of thought that just accepted that Yorubas came from ancient Egypt. And they just say, oh, we came from ancient Egypt. But they don't give any proof. There's another school, mainly composed of British scholars and Western European scholars. They say, oh, you guys are Africans. You're just trying to make yourself important.